I never imagined that fixing a cracked transmission on a Tuesday morning in Phoenix would be the day my past caught up with my present. But there I was, 53 years old, lying under a 2012 Ford F-150 in Bay 3 of Morrison's Auto Repair, when my boss Dennis Kowalski decided to make me the punchline of his daily entertainment. "Hey Gramps, you gonna finish that job before Social Security kicks in? Or should I get one of the real mechanics to handle it?" His voice echoed through the shop, followed by the predictable laughter from Jake and Tommy, the two younger guys who thought sucking up to Dennis would get them somewhere. I slid out from under the truck, wiping transmission fluid from my hands with a rag that had seen better days. The Arizona sun blazed through the open bay doors, making the concrete floor shimmer with heat. I'd been at Morrison's for 8 months now, ever since I'd moved back to Phoenix after Linda passed. 53 years old and starting over in a job that paid $14 an hour. Not exactly the retirement plan I'd had in mind. "I'll have it done by lunch, Dennis," I said quietly. "Just need to replace the torque converter and flush the system." "By lunch?" Dennis walked over, his gut straining against his Morrison's Auto Repair polo shirt. He was maybe 40, had inherited the shop from his father-in-law, and had been running it into the ground ever since. "Brother, my grandmother could move faster than you and she's been dead for 6 years. This is why I don't like hiring old-timers. No offense, but you guys just don't have the speed anymore." "The transmission's shot because someone used the wrong fluid," I said, keeping my voice level. "Can't rush a job like this or the customer will be back here in a month." "Oh, look at that," Dennis said, turning to Jake and Tommy. "The fossil's giving me business advice now. Tell you what, Gramps, you've got until 2 p.m. to finish or I'm docking your pay. And maybe start thinking about whether this job's really for you. There's a Walmart down the street. I hear they love hiring greeters." Jake snickered. Tommy at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I wanted to tell Dennis that I'd rebuilt helicopter engines in conditions he couldn't imagine, that I'd kept birds flying in sandstorms that would have choked his precious AC-cooled shop in minutes, that the crew chiefs I'd worked with in the Navy trusted me with equipment worth millions, with lives that depended on every bolt I torqued, every system I tested. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded and slid back under the truck. That was my life now. Keep your head down. Do the work. Cash the paycheck. Try not to think about what used to be. I'd served 22 years in the Navy as an aviation machinist's mate. Started as an E1 right out of high school in San Diego. Worked my way up to E7, Senior Chief Petty Officer. Spent time on the USS Nimitz, the USS Reagan, did 3 deployments to the Persian Gulf, 2 to the Western Pacific. I'd worked on F-18 Super Hornets, EA-18 Growlers, MH-60 Seahawk helicopters. I knew those birds like some men know their own heartbeat. Those years in the Navy weren't just a job. They were my identity. I remembered my first day at Aviation Machinist's Mate A School in Pensacola, 19 years old, terrified and excited in equal measure. I remembered the first time I successfully troubleshot a complex hydraulic issue on a Super Hornet at 0200 in the middle of the Arabian Sea. The satisfaction of knowing that bird would fly its mission the next morning because I'd done my job right. I remembered teaching junior sailors, watching them go from nervous kids to confident technicians, knowing I'd had a hand in shaping them. I remembered the chief's mess, the brotherhood of senior enlisted, the unspoken understanding that we were the backbone of the Navy. Officers gave orders, but chiefs made things happen. We were the ones who knew how to actually accomplish the mission, who understood the equipment and the people, who could solve problems that didn't have solutions in any technical manual. I remembered deployments, 6 months at a time away from home, but also the camaraderie, the shared purpose, the knowledge that what we were doing mattered. I remembered working in conditions that would have shut down any civilian operation. 120-degree flight decks, sandstorms that turned the air into soup, pitching seas that made every task twice as hard. But we kept those birds flying, because that was what we did. And I remembered the day I retired. The ceremony, the plaques, the speeches about my dedication and service. Linda had been there, already sick, but hiding it well, beaming with pride. My division had given me a shadow box with my career patches and pins. Commander Patterson, who'd been my last CO, had shaken my hand and said, "The Navy is losing one of the best, Senior Chief, but I know you'll be successful in whatever comes next." I'd believed him that day. I'd believed the transition assistance counselors who said my skills were in high demand. I'd believed the recruiters from defense contractors who said they were always looking for experienced maintainers. I'd believed that 22 years of excellence would translate into civilian opportunities. But when you get out after 22 years, when you're trying to transition to civilian life in your late 40s, turns out those skills don't translate as smoothly as the Navy Transition Assistance Program promises. The defense contractors wanted younger guys with engineering degrees. They'd look at my resume, see that I had hands-on experience but no bachelor's degree, and move on to the next candidate. The fact that I could troubleshoot a complex aircraft system in my sleep didn't matter if I didn't have the right letters after my name. The airlines wanted mechanics with civilian certifications I didn't have time or money to get. My airframe and power plant license from the Navy meant nothing to the FAA. I'd need to go back to school, take tests, pay fees, accumulate supervised hours. It would take months, maybe a year, and cost thousands of dollars. And at 51, with Linda fighting stage 4 breast cancer, I needed a job immediately, not in 6 months after retraining. The cancer had been a gut punch. Stage 4 breast cancer, metastasized to her lymph nodes and bones. The oncologist had been gentle but clear. This was terminal. We were talking about months or maybe a couple of years with aggressive treatment, not decades. Linda was 50, supposed to be looking forward to retirement together, to traveling, to growing old together. Instead, we were looking at medical bills, treatment schedules, and end-of-life planning. So I took what I could find. First, it was a quick lube place in Tucson. $11 an hour changing oil and rotating tires. Then, a Firestone in Mesa. $12.50 an hour, mostly tire work and brake jobs. Now Morrison's, $14 an hour, full transmission and engine work, but working for a boss who thought I was a washed-up old man taking up space. Linda used to tell me it was temporary, that something would come through, that my experience had to count for something. Then Linda died and I stopped caring about temporary or permanent. I just cared about getting through each day without thinking too much. I finished the transmission job by 1:30 p.m., drove the truck, checked for leaks and parked it in the completed bay. The next ticket was a Chevy Silverado that needed a full engine diagnostic. Check engine light was on. Owner reported rough idling and poor fuel economy. I was hooking up the diagnostic scanner when Dennis appeared again, this time with a customer. The man was in his 60s, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap and a denim jacket despite the Phoenix heat. "This is going to take how long?" the customer asked, worry creasing his face. Dennis shrugged. "Depends on what the old man finds. Could be a day, could be 3. You know how these things go." He said old man like it was a technical diagnosis. I looked at the scanner readout. Multiple misfires, cylinder 2 and cylinder 5. Probably bad ignition coils, maybe spark plugs. Not complicated. "Sir," I said, addressing the customer directly, "I'll have a full diagnosis within an hour. If it's what I think it is, ignition coils and plugs, I can have you out of here by tomorrow morning." The customer's face relaxed. "You sure?" 22 years working on aircraft engines, sir. A Chevy small block's practically a vacation. Dennis's face went red. "Hey, Morrison, maybe let me handle the customer relations, yeah? You just focus on turning wrenches before you hurt yourself." The customer looked between us, confused. Then he focused on me, really looked at me for the first time. His eyes went to my hands, to the old anchor tattoo on my forearm that I'd gotten in Yokosuka back in '97, to the way I stood. "You serve?" he asked. "Navy," I said. "AME, aviation machinist's mate. Retired 2 years ago." His whole demeanor changed. He straightened up, extended his hand. "Tom Webster, Marines, Force Recon, 68 to 71. "James Morrison," I said, shaking his hand. "Pleasure, sir. The pleasure's mine, son. And don't worry about the timeline. You take whatever time you need to do it right. I trust you." After Tom Webster left, Dennis pulled me aside, his face still flushed. "Listen to me very carefully, Morrison. I don't give a damn about your Navy stories or your bonding moments with customers. You work for me, and when you're in my shop, you represent Morrison's Auto Repair, not the USS whatever the hell. You don't make promises to customers without clearing them with me first. Are we clear?" "Crystal," I said. "Good. Now get that diagnostic done and stop wasting time chatting about the good old days." I went back to the Silverado, but my hands were shaking, not from anger, from something else. From the realization that Tom Webster had looked at me and seen who I used to be, and Dennis Kowalski looked at me and saw only what he wanted to see. A washed-up old man, disposable, replaceable. That night, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment in Tempe, eating microwaved spaghetti and watching the news without really seeing it. The apartment was temporary, had been temporary for 8 months now. Furniture from IKEA that I'd assembled myself. Pictures of Linda still in boxes because hanging them felt too permanent. My Navy plaques and certificates in a closet because looking at them hurt. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Senior Chief Morrison. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yes? Who's this? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Brennan, sir. We served together on the Reagan, 2014 to 2016. I was an ensign then. You probably don't remember me. I did remember her. Sharp kid, good instincts, asked intelligent questions. I taught you the pre-flight inspection protocol on the Seahawks. Yes, sir, you did. Sir, I'm calling because I'm now the commanding officer of HSC-8, the 8-Ballers, out of Naval Air Station, North Island. We're conducting a training exercise at Luke Air Force Base next week, and I have a unique situation. One of my birds developed a transmission issue during transit. Luke's maintenance crews are backed up, and I need someone I trust to inspect the work before we fly. Your name came up. My heart started beating harder. Commander, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not active duty anymore. I'm not even sure I'm current on all the maintenance protocols. Senior Chief, I read your service record before I called. You have more hours on Seahawk transmissions than most of my current crew chiefs combined. This isn't a complex job. The Luke crew will do the actual work. I just need someone with experience to verify it's done right. It's a 2-day job, pays as a civilian contractor. $4,000. $4,000. That was more than a month's salary at Morrison's. When? I asked. Next Thursday and Friday. We'll pick you up at Luke's civilian gate at 0700 Thursday, fly you to the mobile unit on the far side of the base. You inspect the work, sign off or recommend corrections, done. You'd be doing me a huge favor, sir. I don't know if Morrison's will give me the days off. There was a pause. Sir, with respect, is Morrison's auto repair in Phoenix really where you want to be? I've seen your civilian employment records. You're overqualified for that work. It pays the bills, Commander. Barely, sir. Look, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life, but I need someone competent, and you need opportunities that recognize your skill set. This could be a door. You don't have to walk through it, but at least let me open it. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. $4,000, 2 days. A chance to work on the birds I loved again. The next morning, I asked Dennis for Thursday and Friday off. He was eating a breakfast burrito at his desk, grease staining the papers scattered in front of him. 2 days off? Morrison, you just started here 8 months ago. We don't do vacation requests until you've hit a year. It's not vacation, I said. It's a contract job, military consultation. 2 days, I'll be back Monday. Dennis laughed, bits of egg and cheese visible in his teeth. Military consultation? What, the Pentagon needs help changing their oil? No, absolutely not. We're short-staffed as it is. I'll work Saturday and Sunday to make up the hours. Did you not hear me? I said no. You want a second job? Do it on your own time. But Thursday and Friday are regular work days, and you're scheduled. End of discussion. I could feel something shifting inside me, some equation recalculating. This job, $14 an hour. This boss, who treated me like I was lucky to push brooms for him, versus 2 days doing work that mattered, that I was actually qualified for pay that respected my experience. Then I quit, I said. Dennis stopped mid-chew. What? I quit. Effective immediately. I'll finish out today's work, but I'm done. His face went through several colors. You're quitting? Over 2 days? Morrison, you're not going to find another job at your age. You know that, right? Nobody wants to hire some old Navy grease monkey who thinks he's too good for honest work. I think we have different definitions of honest work, Dennis. I'll have my bay cleaned out by 5. I spent that afternoon finishing Tom Webster's Silverado. It was the coils and plugs like I'd diagnosed. Simple job. I took my time, did it right, and test drove it until I was satisfied. When Tom came to pick it up, Dennis handed him the bill with a smirk. $493.78. Morrison's guarantee, 90 days or 3,000 miles. Tom looked at the itemized list, then at me. You did good work? Yes, sir. Replaced ignition coils on cylinders 2 and 5, new plugs on all 8 cylinders, reset the computer. She'll run smooth now. Tom pulled out his credit card, paid, then pulled out his wallet again and handed me $200 bills. That's for you, son, for doing it right. Sir, I can't accept that, I started. Yes, you can. A man who knows his trade deserves to be paid for his knowledge, not just his time. You take that. After Tom left, Dennis grabbed my arm. Did you just accept a tip without clearing it with me? That money belongs to the shop. That money belongs to me, I said, pulling my arm free. And as of right now, I don't work here anymore. I cleaned out my toolbox, loaded it into my 2008 Tacoma, and drove away from Morrison's Auto Repair for the last time. I felt lighter than I had in months. Thursday morning, 06:30, I pulled up to Luke Air Force Base's civilian access gate. The guard checked my ID against Commander Brennan's authorization list and waved me through to a staging area near the flight line. The sound hit me first. That distinctive chopping thud of rotor blades cutting through air. Then I saw it. An MH-60 Romeo Seahawk in the grey and white Navy paint scheme, sitting on the tarmac with rotors turning at idle. Crew chiefs were running pre-flight checks, and a figure in a flight suit stood near the bird, clipboard in hand. Commander Brennan looked older than I remembered, more confident. She walked over with a smile and extended her hand. Senior Chief Morrison, thank you for coming. Good to see you again, ma'am. The bird looks good. She does, but that transmission's been making noises I don't like. Luke's crew swapped out the main rotor gearbox yesterday, but I need experienced eyes on their work before I risk my crew. You ready? I followed her to the Seahawk, and the moment I climbed up to the transmission bay, something inside me clicked back into place. My hands knew where everything was. The toolbox Commander Brennan provided felt familiar despite being different equipment. The smell of hydraulic fluid and turbine oil and metal was home. This wasn't just a transmission bay. This was a piece of my life that I'd thought was gone forever. The MH-60 Romeo transmission system, with its main rotor gearbox, intermediate gearbox, tail rotor gearbox, and all the connecting drive shafts and couplings. I'd worked on hundreds of these systems over 22 years. I knew every component, every tolerance, every common failure point. The work was meditative, checking torque specs with a calibrated wrench, feeling the resistance as each fastener seated properly, examining seals with my fingertips, feeling for irregularities that my eyes might miss, verifying fluid levels against technical specifications that I'd memorized decades ago, testing the chip detectors, those magnetic plugs that caught metal particles and warned of impending failure, reviewing the maintenance logs, seeing the history of this particular aircraft, understanding its story. This was what I'd been trained to do. This was what I was good at. And for the first time since Linda died, for the first time since I'd retired from the Navy, I felt like myself again. I spent 6 hours that first day going over every inch of that transmission installation, checked torque specs on every accessible fastener, examined seals and gaskets for proper seating, verified fluid levels and tested for proper viscosity, tested the chip detectors for magnetic particle accumulation, reviewed the maintenance logs line by line, looking for patterns or concerns. Luke's crew had done good work overall, but I found 3 minor issues that needed correction. A seal that wasn't seated properly and would leak within a month of operation, a drain plug that was cross-threaded and might strip completely under operational stress, and a safety wire that wasn't twisted to spec and wouldn't hold if the bolt worked loose under vibration. These won't cause catastrophic failure immediately, I told Commander Brennan, but they'll cause problems down the line. The seal will leak transmission fluid within a few weeks of operation. You'll notice it during pre-flight checks, hopefully before it becomes a safety issue, but it shouldn't have been missed during installation. The drain plug is more serious. It's cross-threaded, probably forced during installation. Right now it's holding, but under operational vibration and thermal cycling, it could strip completely. If that happens in flight, you'll lose transmission fluid rapidly, and that's a potential aircraft loss scenario. The safety wire is a quality control issue. It's twisted, but not to specification. Regulation calls for 6 to 8 twists per inch. This has maybe 4. Under vibration, that bolt could work loose and the safety wire won't catch it. She looked at Luke's maintenance chief, a technical sergeant who'd been hovering nervously, his face growing redder with each issue I identified. Sergeant Davis, your team available to make these corrections? Yes, ma'am, absolutely. We'll have it done by tomorrow morning. His voice was tight, professional, but clearly embarrassed that a civilian contractor had found issues his team had missed. I felt for him. I remembered being a young crew chief, having my work inspected by senior chiefs who found every tiny mistake, who held me to standards that seemed impossibly high. It felt like punishment at the time. It felt personal, like they were trying to make me look bad. But later, when I was the senior chief doing the inspecting, I understood. It wasn't personal. It was about the aircraft, about the mission, about the lives that depended on every single thing being done exactly right. A seal that leaked, a plug that stripped, a safety wire that failed, any of those could lead to a transmission failure in flight, and a transmission failure in a helicopter meant people died. "Sergeant Davis," I said after Commander Brennan walked away to coordinate with her crew, "these are good catches for you and your team. You're going to learn more from fixing these issues than from doing 100 perfect installations. The fact that you're willing to make the corrections immediately, that you're not defensive or making excuses, tells me you're a good maintainer who just needs more experience. Keep that attitude, and you'll be excellent at this." His expression changed. The embarrassment faded, replaced by something else. Gratitude, maybe, or respect. "Thank you, Senior Chief. I appreciate that. And you're right. We're going to learn from this." That night, Commander Brennan bought me dinner at a restaurant off base, a place called Rosita's that served authentic Mexican food, and had been a Luke AFB institution for 30 years. Over steaks and beer, she told me about the squadron, about the training missions they were running, about the gaps in experienced maintainers they were struggling with. "The Navy's hemorrhaging senior enlisted," she said. "The retention rates are terrible. And the kids we're getting now, they're smart, but they don't have the years of experience that someone like you brought to the job. We're having to relearn lessons you guys already knew." "How do you fix that?" "Honestly, we're trying civilian contractor programs, retired military who want to stay involved, advisory roles, training positions, inspection services like what you did today. It's not perfect, but it helps." She paused. "You ever think about doing this full-time?" "I'm 53 years old, Commander. Most contractor programs want younger guys." "Most programs don't know what they want," she corrected. "They think they want youth, but what they actually need is competence. You proved today that your skills are not only intact, they're sharp. You caught things my crew chiefs missed, things the Air Force maintainers missed. That's not something you teach in A school. That's experience." Friday morning, I verified Luke's corrections, signed off on the transmission, and watched Commander Brennan's crew run engine tests. Everything checked out perfectly. The bird was ready to fly. "Senior Chief," Commander Brennan said as we walked back to the staging area, "I'm putting your name forward for something. Naval Air Systems Command is starting a contractor program for senior maintainer advisors. They need people who can inspect work, train junior personnel, and provide institutional knowledge. It's part-time at first, maybe 20 hours a week, but it pays $45 an hour. If you're interested, I'll make sure your name gets to the right people. $45 an hour, 20 hours a week. That was $900 a week, $3,600 a month, more than I made working full-time at Morrison's. I'm very interested, ma'am." She smiled. "Good. I'll be in touch." I drove home that Friday afternoon feeling something I hadn't felt since Linda died. Hope, purpose, the sense that maybe my skills still mattered in the world. That hope lasted exactly 4 days. Tuesday morning, I got a call from Jake, one of the younger mechanics from Morrison's. "Dude, you need to see this," Jake said, his voice tight. "Dennis is telling everyone you got fired for incompetence. He's got Tom Webster's Silverado back in the shop. Transmission failed. Complete destruction. Dennis is saying you sabotaged it because you were pissed about quitting." My blood went cold. "That's impossible. I did that job right. Checked everything twice. I know, man. I saw the work. It was clean. But the truck is here, and the transmission is demolished. And Dennis is telling Tom Webster that you're a washed-up Navy reject who doesn't know the difference between an aircraft and an automobile. He's threatening to sue you for damages. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Morrison's was packed when I arrived. Tom Webster's Silverado was up on the lift in Bay 1, and sure enough, transmission fluid was pouring out of the bell housing. Dennis stood beneath it with Tom and 3 other people I didn't recognize. "There he is," Dennis announced when he saw me. "The expert, the Navy hero. Come take a look at your handiwork, Morrison." I walked over, my stomach churning. The transmission pan was cracked, the torque converter was shattered, and metal shavings coated everything. "What happened?" I asked Tom Webster directly. "You tell me," Tom said. His face was hard, angry. "Truck ran great for 3 days. Then yesterday, I'm driving on the I-10 and the whole transmission just disintegrates. Could have gotten me killed. Dennis here says you didn't torque the bolts properly. Says the whole thing shook loose. That's not possible," I said. "I torqued everything to spec. Used a calibrated wrench. This kind of damage doesn't happen from improper installation." "Oh, really?" Dennis pointed to the transmission mount. "Because those bolts are loose and that," he pointed to the torque converter, "is completely destroyed. What else could cause this?" I climbed up on the lift to get a closer look. The damage was catastrophic, but something was wrong. The pattern of the damage, the way the metal had failed. "When did this happen exactly?" I asked Tom. "Yesterday afternoon, around 4 p.m. I was doing maybe 65 on the interstate when I heard this god-awful grinding noise, and then the whole truck just lost power. Had to get towed here." I looked at the mileage. Tom had driven the truck exactly 347 miles since I'd finished the work. For a properly installed transmission, that should have been the easiest 347 miles of its life. The break-in period. Unless. I examined the transmission pan more closely. The crack originated from the inside, not the outside. The torque converter hadn't shaken loose. It had exploded from internal pressure, and the metal shavings were the wrong color for wear. They were bright, fresh, indicative of sudden, catastrophic failure, not gradual loosening. I ran my finger along the inside of the pan. The texture was wrong, gritty, abrasive. I'd felt this before, on aircraft that had ingested foreign object debris. This wasn't normal wear. This was contamination. The transmission had eaten itself from the inside out. The bearings had been destroyed by something that didn't belong in the system, something that had been introduced deliberately, in a quantity that would cause catastrophic failure within a few hundred miles, but not immediately. Whoever did this knew enough about transmissions to calibrate the sabotage perfectly. I looked at the fluid drain plug. It had been removed and reinstalled recently. The torque marks were fresh, different from the pattern I'd left. Someone had drained the fluid, added contamination and refilled it. Probably valve grinding compound, maybe mixed with metal shavings, something that would circulate through the system, destroy the bearings, and make it look like installation failure. My brain was putting the pieces together. Tom Webster bringing the truck in Friday, 3 days after I'd finished the work, saying it was running rough. It hadn't been running rough when I'd test-driven it. Dennis having the truck for 30 minutes while Tom ran errands. 30 minutes would be plenty of time to drain some fluid, add contamination, refill, and start the truck briefly to ensure the compound was circulating. Then Tom drives normally for a couple days. Contamination does its work. Transmission fails catastrophically, and Dennis points the finger at me. "Someone tampered with this," I said. Dennis laughed. "Oh, here we go. The conspiracy theories." "What? You think someone snuck into Tom's garage and sabotaged his transmission just to make you look bad?" "No," I said. "I think someone put something in the transmission fluid. Something abrasive. Something that would cause rapid bearing failure and catastrophic damage within a few days." Dennis's laugh became forced. "That's insane. Why would anyone do that?" "Because Tom Webster gave me a $200 tip. Because you thought that money belonged to you. Because I quit and made you look bad in front of a customer." The color drained from Dennis's face, just for a second. Then he recovered. "You're out of your mind. Tom, this guy's clearly unstable. You should sue him for every penny." But Tom Webster was watching Dennis carefully now. "Dennis, when I brought the truck in Friday to show you it was running rough, you said you'd take a quick look while I ran some errands. You had it for about 30 minutes. What did you do?" "I just checked the fluid levels," Dennis said quickly. "Standard service check." "You checked the fluid levels," Tom repeated, "on a transmission that had just been fully serviced 3 days earlier." The room was silent. "Did you put something in my transmission, Dennis?" Tom's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Did you sabotage my truck to frame this man?" "Of course not. That's insane. Why would I destroy a customer's vehicle?" $200, I said. "That's why. I embarrassed you. I quit. And Tom respected my work enough to tip me $200 in front of your whole shop, so you decided to destroy my reputation and make Tom think I was incompetent. Probably figured you'd get the repair job too." What was the quote going to be? 3,000? 4,000? Dennis's face was pure rage now. Get out of my shop, right now, before I call the cops and have you arrested for trespassing and slander. One of the men standing with Tom stepped forward. He was tall, mid-60s, wearing a suit that screamed attorney. Actually, Dennis, before we make any calls, I'd like to get a second opinion on this transmission. Tom asked me to come as a witness today. I'm his attorney, Michael Chen, and Mr. Morrison. If you're alleging sabotage, I think we should have an independent mechanic examine this vehicle before anyone touches anything else. 4 hours later, an independent transmission specialist from a shop in Scottsdale confirmed what I'd suspected. Foreign material in the transmission fluid, consistent with valve grinding compound. A deliberate act. And the timing of the failure, combined with Dennis's admission that he'd had access to the vehicle, painted a clear picture. Tom Webster didn't sue me. He sued Dennis Kowalski and Morrison's Auto Repair for fraud, sabotage, and negligence. But here's where the story takes a turn I never expected. That night, after everything with Dennis and Tom Webster, I got another call from Commander Brennan. Senior Chief, I have a situation. The squadron has a PR event scheduled for tomorrow at Morrison Community Center in Phoenix. We're supposed to do a demonstration flight, land in the parking lot, let kids tour the aircraft, talk about Navy careers. But our scheduled senior enlisted advisor just tested positive for COVID. I need someone who can speak to civilians, especially kids, about what it's like to work on these birds. Can you help me out? The Morrison Community Center was in a rough part of Phoenix, the kind of neighborhood where kids needed to see possibilities beyond what they saw every day. The kind of place where a Navy helicopter landing might be the most interesting thing that happened all year. I can be there, I said. What time? 1100 hours. And Senior Chief, wear something that shows your service. These kids need to see veterans who are proud of what they did. Wednesday morning, I put on khakis and the Navy windbreaker I'd gotten at my retirement ceremony, the one with my rank insignia and my hash marks showing 22 years of service. 7 red hash marks on the lower left sleeve, each one representing 4 years of service. 28 years compressed into 7 small stripes. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I recognized the man looking back. I drove to the Morrison Community Center and found about 200 people gathered in the parking lot. Kids from local schools, community members, some local media. The energy was electric. Kids were bouncing with excitement. Parents were smiling. Teachers were trying to maintain some semblance of order. A local news crew was setting up their camera. The community center had put up a banner. "Welcome, U.S. Navy. Thank you for your service." And standing near the back of the crowd, looking small and uncomfortable, was Dennis Kowalski. He didn't see me at first. He was talking to a woman, probably his wife, gesturing animatedly. His body language was defensive, aggressive. I could imagine what he was saying, that the lawsuit was frivolous, that Tom Webster was being unreasonable, that I'd manipulated everyone, that his business was being destroyed by lies and jealousy. Then the helicopter appeared. I heard it before I saw it. That distinctive sound that every military veteran knows in their bones. The thump, thump, thump of rotor blades cutting through air, getting louder, closer. Kids started pointing at the sky, searching for the source of the sound. Then it crested the buildings to the east. The MH-60 Romeo came in from the east, flying low over the Phoenix skyline, its rotors thundering, the morning sun glinting off its gray and white paint scheme. It was beautiful, powerful, a reminder of everything I'd been part of, everything I'd helped keep flying over 2 decades of service. Kids started cheering. Adults pulled out phones to record. The rotor wash created a small dust storm in the parking lot as the pilot brought the bird into a hover. I could see the crew chief in the door, giving hand signals to the pilot, guiding him down. The skids touched concrete with barely a bump. Perfect landing. The kind of landing that takes thousands of hours of practice. The pilot powered down to idle, and the rotor wash subsided. In the relative quiet that followed, with the rotors still turning but slower, the sound became almost musical. A rhythmic beat that I'd fallen asleep to countless times on carrier decks. Commander Brennan was first out, followed by her crew chiefs. Then I saw someone else climbing out of the bird. A 2-star admiral in flight suit, shoulder boards gleaming. Rear Admiral Patricia Cordova, commander of Naval Air Forces Pacific. My heart skipped. Commander Brennan hadn't mentioned the admiral would be here. Admiral Cordova walked toward the gathered crowd with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades earning the right to wear those stars. She was mid-50s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that made people stand straighter without realizing they were doing it. The community center director, a woman named Maria Gonzalez, stepped up to a microphone that had been set up near the helicopter. "Thank you all for coming today. We're honored to have the United States Navy here to show our community what opportunities exist for young people who want to serve. This is about more than just a helicopter landing. This is about showing our kids that there are paths to success, to dignity, to purpose that they might not see in their everyday lives. I'd like to introduce Commander Sarah Brennan, Commanding Officer of Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron 8, the 8 Ballers." Commander Brennan took the microphone, gave a brief talk about the squadron, the mission, the training. She explained how Seahawk helicopters were used for anti-submarine warfare, search and rescue, maritime strike, and logistics support. She talked about the training pipeline, the commitment required, the opportunities available. The kids listened, rapt. Then she did something I didn't expect. "Today we also want to highlight the kind of career you can build in the Navy. We've brought someone who spent 22 years serving his country, maintaining the aircraft that keep our sailors and Marines safe. He's a senior chief petty officer, retired, a master aviation machinist's mate, and he's now consulting with us to train the next generation. This man has forgotten more about helicopter maintenance than most people will ever know. His hands have worked on aircraft in conditions you can't imagine, and his expertise has kept countless sailors safe over 2 decades of service. Senior Chief James Morrison, would you come up here?" Every eye in that crowd turned to me, 200 faces swiveling in unison, including Dennis Kowalski's. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that might have been fear or humiliation or both. His mouth opened slightly. His wife looked at him confused, probably wondering why her husband suddenly looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. I walked to the front, past families and kids and community members, and took the microphone from Commander Brennan. My hands were shaking, but not from nervousness, from something else, from vindication, from the realization that this moment, this public acknowledgement of who I really was happening in front of the man who'd dismissed me as a washed-up old fool. "Thank you, Commander." I looked out at the crowd, my voice steady now. "My name is James Morrison. I grew up in a town not far from here, joined the Navy right out of high school because I wanted to work with my hands, and I wanted to serve something bigger than myself. I wasn't the best student, I wasn't going to college, but I was good with tools, good at figuring out how things worked, and I wanted to be part of something that mattered. The Navy taught me how to maintain some of the most complex machines ever built. They taught me discipline, attention to detail, and the importance of doing the job right because lives depend on it. Every time a pilot climbs into a cockpit, every time a crew chief flies a mission, they're trusting that the maintainers did their job perfectly. There's no room for almost right. There's no room for good enough. It has to be perfect, every time. I talked for 10 minutes about my career, about the places I'd seen, the people I'd worked with. I told them about working on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, how loud it was, how dangerous, how every single person had to know their job perfectly, or people could die. I told them about working in 120-degree heat in the Persian Gulf, about fixing hydraulic leaks at 2 in the morning so a bird could fly its mission at dawn, about the satisfaction of keeping aircraft flying in impossible conditions, about the brotherhood of the maintenance community, how we took care of each other because our lives depended on it, and I talked about transition, about how hard it is to leave the military and find your place in the civilian world, about how the skills that made you valuable in uniform don't always translate to civilian life in obvious ways, about how you have to keep believing in your own worth even when employers can't see it. "But here's what I want you young people to understand," I said, looking at the kids in the front row. "The skills you learn in the military, whether you serve 4 years or 24 years, they're yours forever. Work ethic, attention to detail, the ability to stay calm under pressure, the understanding that excellence is not an option, but a requirement. Those skills will take you anywhere you want to go in life. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When I finished, Admiral Cordova took the microphone. "Senior Chief Morrison is exactly the kind of veteran we want to stay connected with the Navy family. His expertise is irreplaceable, and we're proud to have him consulting with our squadrons." But he's also an example of what we want young people to know, that technical skills, dedication and integrity will take you far in life, whether you serve 4 years or 24 years. Then they opened the helicopter for tours, and kids swarmed the bird. I spent the next 2 hours helping crew chiefs show kids the transmission I'd inspected, the engines, the rotors, explaining how it all worked, answering questions. Watching eyes light up when kids realized that people like them could learn to do this. Dennis Kowalski left about 30 minutes into the tours. I saw him walking to his truck, shoulders hunched, his wife following. He didn't look back. 3 weeks later, Tom Webster's lawsuit against Morrison's auto repair was settled out of court. Dennis's insurance paid for Tom's truck repairs and then some, but the damage to Morrison's reputation was permanent. Word got around about the sabotage. Customers stopped coming. 6 months later, Dennis sold the shop at a loss. The Naval Air Systems Command Contractor Program offered me a position as a senior maintenance advisor, 25 hours a week at $45 an hour, with the possibility of full-time if I wanted it. I took it. The work was everything I needed: inspections, training, consulting with squadron maintenance departments, using my experience to help junior sailors avoid the mistakes I'd made, teaching them the tricks I'd learned over 22 years. I also started getting calls from other contractors, defense companies, aviation maintenance firms. Turns out that Commander Brennan's recommendation carried weight. My calendar filled up with consulting jobs, inspection contracts, training seminars. Within a year, I was making more than I'd made as a senior chief on active duty. But the best call came from Tom Webster. He joined the board of directors for a veterans employment nonprofit in Phoenix. They helped military veterans transition to civilian careers, connected them with employers who valued their skills, provided training and certification programs. "We need someone to run our aviation and technical trades division," Tom said. "Someone who understands both the military side and the civilian side. Someone who can bridge that gap. Pay is $65,000 a year, full benefits, and you'd be helping hundreds of veterans every year. You interested?" I took the job. The Veterans Career Center was located in a renovated warehouse near Sky Harbor Airport. We had 6 full-time staff, 24 volunteers, and relationships with hundreds of employers across Arizona. Our mission was simple: help military veterans transition to meaningful civilian careers by connecting their military skills to civilian opportunities, providing training and certification where needed, and advocating for them with employers. My first week, I interviewed 32 veterans. They ranged from 22-year-old kids who'd done 1 enlistment to 60-year-old retirees who'd served 30 years. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, infantry, logistics, intelligence, medical, maintenance, administration, every branch, every specialty, every rank, and almost all of them told me the same story. "I can't find work that values what I did. Nobody understands my skills. Employers see the military on my resume and think I'm rigid or violent or broken. I'm working at Home Depot for $12 an hour, even though I managed a maintenance facility worth $500 million. I coordinated logistics for a battalion, but nobody will hire me as an operations manager because I don't have a business degree. I treated combat casualties in field hospitals, but I can't get hired as an EMT without civilian certifications." It was my story, repeated over and over. Skilled, dedicated people who'd served their country with distinction, now working jobs that didn't challenge them, didn't value them, didn't pay them what they were worth. But here's what I learned in those first few months. The problem wasn't the veterans. The veterans were incredible. They showed up on time, they worked hard, they learned fast, they gave a damn about doing the job right. The problem was the gap between military experience and civilian understanding. A civilian hiring manager looks at a resume that says supervised maintenance of aircraft valued at $80 million and thinks that's not relevant to supervising auto repair. They don't see that managing a team of technicians working on complex machinery under pressure is the same core skill set, whether it's a helicopter or a truck. They don't see that attention to detail, following procedures, quality control, and safety consciousness translate directly. So our job became translation, taking military experience and explaining it in terms civilian employers could understand, building relationships with companies willing to give veterans a real chance, providing bridge training for certifications and licenses that shouldn't have been necessary, but were required by civilian regulations. We placed a former Army helicopter mechanic as a maintenance supervisor at a construction equipment company. He went from making $15 an hour changing oil to making $65,000 a year, managing a team of 12 technicians. The company president called me 3 months later and asked if I had more veterans like him. We placed a former Navy logistics specialist as an operations manager at a shipping company. She'd coordinated supply chains for an aircraft carrier strike group, but couldn't get interviews because she didn't have a college degree. We connected her with a company willing to value her experience, and she became their most effective manager within 6 months. We placed a former Marine infantryman as a safety coordinator at a manufacturing plant. He'd led combat patrols in Afghanistan, kept his squad alive in the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. Those same skills, risk assessment, leadership under pressure, attention to detail, made him an outstanding safety professional. 2 years after that humiliating day at Morrison's Auto Repair, I was sitting in an office at the Veterans Career Center in Phoenix, interviewing a former Marine helicopter mechanic who'd been struggling to find work. His name was David Rodriguez. He was 28, had 2 kids, and was working at a fast food restaurant because nobody would hire him for what he actually knew how to do. He'd served 6 years as a helicopter mechanic on CH-53s, the big cargo helicopters. He'd deployed twice, once to Afghanistan and once to East Africa. He'd maintained aircraft in desert conditions, kept birds flying despite equipment shortages and impossible timelines. He'd been honorably discharged, gotten out with solid evaluations, and couldn't find work. "I've applied to every aviation company in Arizona," he said, his voice tired. "Boeing, Honeywell, all the defense contractors. They all want engineers or people with civilian certifications. I've got 6 years of experience working on aircraft that make a Seahawk look simple, but it doesn't matter." One recruiter told me my experience was too specialized, that I needed to be realistic about my employment prospects. "I know exactly how you feel," I told him. And then I told him my story. The whole thing. Morrison's, Dennis, the helicopter landing, everything. How I'd been dismissed as a washed-up old man, how I'd felt worthless, how I'd almost given up, and how one phone call had opened a door that led to everything I had now. His eyes were wet when I finished. "So there's hope. Even when you're older, even when it seems like nobody values what you did. There's always hope," I said. "But sometimes you have to create your own opportunities. Sometimes you have to prove your worth to people who are actually capable of recognizing it. Now tell me about your work on the CH-53s. What were your primary responsibilities?" We spent 2 hours going through his experience, translating his military skills into civilian language. He didn't just perform maintenance. He managed complex inspection schedules, coordinated with multiple departments, trained junior Marines, troubleshot systems failures under time pressure, maintained detailed records, and ensured quality control. Those were all skills civilian employers needed. We just had to explain them properly. A week later, I connected David with the maintenance manager at a company that serviced corporate helicopters in Scottsdale. They were skeptical at first. He didn't have civilian experience, but I vouched for him and convinced them to give him a working interview. He spent a day in their shop, proved he knew what he was doing, and they hired him on the spot. $52,000 a year to start, with a clear path to supervisor positions. David called me 2 weeks into the job, his voice breaking. "Mr. Morrison, I don't know how to thank you. This is the first time since I got out that I've felt like my service mattered. Like what I did wasn't wasted. My kids are proud of me again. My wife is proud of me. I'm proud of me. That's why I did this work." Those phone calls made every frustration, every bureaucratic hassle, every difficult conversation with skeptical employers worth it. 3 months ago, I got one more call, this one from Dennis Kowalski. "Morrison," he said, his voice rough, unsteady. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. The way I treated you, the things I said, sabotaging Tom's truck, I was an idiot. Worse than an idiot, I was cruel and it destroyed everything." I was quiet for a long moment. The last time I'd thought about Dennis Kowalski was probably 6 months ago, when Tom Webster mentioned that Morrison's Auto Repair had finally sold. I'd felt nothing hearing that news, not satisfaction, not vindication, just a vague sense that justice had been served through natural consequences. Now, hearing his voice, I felt something more complex. He sounded broken, genuinely remorseful. Not the performative apology of someone trying to get something, but the raw admission of someone who'd hit bottom and was looking up at the damage they'd caused. Why are you calling now, Dennis? Because I lost everything. The shop, my marriage, my reputation. I'm working at a quick lube place now, making $12 an hour. And every day I think about how I had a guy working for me who actually knew what he was doing, who could have made that shop something special, and I treated him like garbage because I was insecure and stupid. I saw you on the news last week, the segment about the Veterans Career Center, and I realized that while my life was falling apart because of my own choices, you built something meaningful. You helped people. And I destroyed my business by destroying the one employee who could have actually taught me something. He paused. I need you to know that I know what I did was wrong. Not just wrong, evil. I sabotaged a man's truck, put him at risk, tried to destroy your reputation because I was jealous of a $200 tip. That's pathetic, that's unforgivable, and I've spent every day since the lawsuit was settled knowing that I deserved everything that happened to me. What do you want from me? I don't want anything, he said quickly. I'm not asking for a job or a favor or for you to put in a good word for me somewhere. I just wanted you to know that I know I was wrong and that I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. You deserved better than how I treated you. You deserved respect and recognition and gratitude for the work you did. And instead I mocked you and sabotaged you and tried to destroy you. I'm sorry, Morrison. I'm deeply, truly sorry. The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing, could hear what might have been tears. I thought about holding a grudge, about telling him exactly what I thought of him, about letting him twist in the consequences of his choices. Part of me wanted to. The part that remembered standing in that parking lot with $40 and nowhere to go. The part that remembered his laughter when he called me Gramps. The part that remembered him trying to destroy my reputation to cover his own insecurity. But then I thought about what Linda would have said, about what Tom Webster showed me when he gave me a chance after Dennis lied about me, about what Commander Brennan did when she called me for that first job, even though I was just a retired chief with no connections, about the dozens of veterans I'd helped who'd been given second chances by employers willing to look past their lack of civilian experience. Everyone deserves a path forward, Linda used to say. Not everyone takes it, but everyone deserves the chance. Apology accepted, Dennis, I said, and if you're serious about turning things around, call me tomorrow. The Veterans Career Center works with civilian employers too, not just veterans. We have relationships with companies looking for experienced technicians. We might be able to help you get some certifications, connect you with better opportunities. No promises, but I'll see what I can do. The silence on the other end was long. Then, why would you help me after what I did? Because someone helped me when I needed it, I said. Because Tom Webster could have written me off when you told him I'd sabotaged his truck, but he didn't. Because Commander Brennan could have moved on to the next name on her list when she needed a contractor, but she took a chance on someone she'd worked with years ago. Because the Veterans Career Center exists, because people believed that everyone deserves an opportunity to prove their worth. That's how this works, Dennis. That's how we build a society that's worth living in. Not by holding grudges forever, but by giving people who genuinely want to change the chance to do it. He was crying now. No attempt to hide it. Thank you, he managed. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Maybe not, I said. But deserve is complicated. You made terrible choices, and you paid a terrible price. You lost your business, your marriage, your reputation. Those are real consequences, and they should be. But that doesn't mean you're condemned to making $12 an hour at a quick lube place for the rest of your life. You're what, 42 now? You've got decades ahead of you. You can spend them bitter and broken, or you can spend them building something better. Your choice. I'll call tomorrow, he said. And Morrison, thank you for being a better man than I was. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and consequences and second chances. Dennis had done real damage to Tom Webster's truck, to my reputation temporarily, to his own employees who'd learned terrible habits from a terrible boss, to the customers who'd been overcharged or gotten shoddy work. He deserved consequences. He got them. His business failed. His marriage ended. He lost everything he'd built through his own arrogance and cruelty. But did he deserve to be condemned forever? Did one series of terrible decisions mean he should never have another chance? I didn't know the answer to that, but I knew what Linda would have said, and I knew what my own experience had taught me. That people are complex, that they're capable of both terrible cruelty and genuine growth, that the same person who mocks and sabotages can also recognize their failures and genuinely try to change. Would Dennis actually change? Would he take the opportunity I was offering and build something better? Or would he fall back into old patterns, blame others, make excuses? I didn't know, but I was willing to find out. Because if I'd learned anything from my own journey, it was that the helicopter only lands if someone's willing to offer you a seat. And maybe, just maybe, I could be someone's helicopter. I think about that day in the Morrison's parking lot sometimes, about the moment when the helicopter appeared, when Dennis Kowalski realized that the washed-up old mechanic he'd been mocking was actually someone important, someone skilled, someone who mattered. But that moment, satisfying as it was, wasn't the real victory. The real victory was every veteran I helped place in a good job after that, every young person I taught about the value of technical skills and dedication, every time I inspected an aircraft and knew that my experience was keeping people safe. Dennis was wrong about a lot of things, but he was especially wrong about this. He thought age made me less valuable. He thought my best years were behind me. Turns out I was just getting started. I'm 55 now. I work 4 days a week at the Veterans Career Center and 1 day a week consulting with Navy squadrons. I make good money. I sleep well at night. I have pictures of Linda on my walls now, in the house I bought last year in Chandler. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. And twice a month I drive to Morrison Community Center and volunteer with the youth aviation program we started there. We bring kids from underserved neighborhoods, teach them basic mechanical skills, show them that there are paths in life beyond what they see in their immediate surroundings. Some of them will join the military, some won't, but all of them will know that their potential isn't limited by their circumstances. Last month, one of those kids, a 15-year-old named Marcus, asked me a question while we were working on a donated helicopter transmission that I'd gotten from a Navy surplus auction. "Mr. Morrison, how did you know you wanted to work on helicopters?" "I didn't," I told him honestly. "I just knew I wanted to work with my hands and do something that mattered. The helicopters came later, but here's what I learned. It doesn't matter what you work on. Cars, helicopters, buildings, computers. What matters is that you care about doing it right, that you take pride in your work. That you understand your value doesn't come from what other people think of you, but from what you know you're capable of." Marcus nodded slowly. "Like, even if people treat you bad, you still have worth. Especially then," I said. "Especially when people don't see it. That's when you have to know it for yourself." He went back to work on the transmission, his hands careful, precise. I watched him and thought about that March day when I'd been lying under a truck at Morrison's, wondering if this was all there was left for me, wondering if Dennis was right, if I was just a washed-up old man taking up space. The helicopter hadn't just been a dramatic moment. It had been a doorway, a reminder that my skills mattered, that my experience had value, that there were people and organizations who needed what I could offer. But I'd had to be ready to walk through that door when it opened. I'd had to be willing to quit the job that wasn't serving me, to take risks, to believe in my own worth even when nobody else did. That's what I try to teach the veterans who come through our center now. That the civilian world is hard to navigate, that not every employer will understand what you bring to the table, that you'll face rejection and discrimination, and people who think military service is just something you did when you couldn't find a real job. But you'll also find the Tom Websters of the world, who recognize integrity when they see it. You'll find the Sarah Brennans, who remember good work and create opportunities. You'll find communities and organizations that need your skills desperately, even if they don't know it yet. Your job is to stay ready, to keep your skills sharp, to not let the Dennis Kowalskis of the world convince you that you're less than you are. Because someday, maybe when you least expect it, your helicopter will land, and when it does, you need to be the person who's ready to climb aboard. I still work on that Seahawk transmission sometimes, the one we use for the youth program. My hands still know every bolt, every seal, every specification. The muscle memory doesn't fade, even at 55. Neither does the satisfaction of doing the job right. Last week, Admiral Cordova came back to Phoenix for another community event. After the speeches and the tours, she pulled me aside. "Senior Chief, I've been hearing good things about your work with the Veterans Career Center. Over 200 successful placements last year." "Yes, ma'am. 237, actually." Mix of aviation, technical trades, and skilled labor positions. 93% retention rate after 1 year. She smiled. That's outstanding. How would you feel about expanding the program? We're looking at creating similar centers in San Diego and Norfolk. We'd need someone to oversee the development, train the staff, establish the protocols. It would be a significant increase in responsibility and compensation. I looked past her at the helicopter sitting in the parking lot, at the kids lined up to tour it, at Marcus helping a younger child understand how the rotor system worked. Ma'am, I'd be honored, I said, but I have one condition. I want to keep working directly with veterans at least 1 day a week. I don't want to become so administrative that I forget what it's like on the ground. I wouldn't have it any other way, Senior Chief. That's exactly why you're the right person for this job. Later that evening, I drove past Morrison's Auto Repair. The building was empty now, a for lease sign in the window. The paint was fading. The parking lot was cracked and weedy. It looked exactly like what it was, the corpse of a business that died because the owner valued ego over excellence. I didn't feel satisfaction looking at it. I felt something closer to sadness. For Dennis, yes, but also for all the potential that had been wasted there. For the customers who'd been overcharged or gotten shoddy work. For the young mechanics who'd learned bad habits. For the opportunities that had been missed because one man's insecurity had poisoned everything around him. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd had the courage to walk away when walking away seemed terrifying. Grateful that Commander Brennan had made that phone call. Grateful that Tom Webster had been willing to look past Dennis's lies and see the truth. Grateful that I'd been given a second act when so many veterans never find theirs. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Mr. M, I figured out what was wrong with that torque spec you asked about. It's because the bolt was metric, not standard. Can we go over it at next session? I smiled and texted back, absolutely. That's exactly the kind of attention to detail that makes a great mechanic. See you Thursday. That kid was going to be okay. He had the hands, the mind, and most importantly, the attitude. In a few years, he'd probably be maintaining aircraft himself, or running his own shop, or teaching the next generation. The cycle would continue. I pulled into my driveway in Chandler, the Arizona sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Inside, the house smelled like the roast I'd put in the slow cooker that morning. Linda's picture smiled at me from the mantel. I wished she could see this, see how everything had turned out. But maybe somehow she knew. I poured a beer, sat on the back patio, and thought about helicopters, about how they work by creating lift through the rotation of blades that push against the air, about how the physics seem impossible until you understand the principles, about how something so heavy and ungainly can fly if all the components work together properly. Kind of like life, I guess. At 53, I'd thought my best days were behind me, that I was too old, too damaged, too stuck in my ways to start over. That civilian employers like Dennis would always see me as a washed-up old military guy who couldn't cut it in the real world. I'd been spectacularly wrong. The real world wasn't Morrison's Auto Repair. The real world was the hundreds of veterans I'd helped find meaningful work, the kids I was teaching to love aviation maintenance, the squadrons I was consulting with, the programs I was building, the life I was creating from the wreckage of the old one. And if I ever doubted whether I'd made the right choices, I just had to remember that Tuesday morning. The sound of rotor blades cutting through the Arizona sky. Dennis Kowalski's face when he realized who I actually was. The kids cheering as the Navy helicopter landed in a community center parking lot. That was the moment when everything changed. Not because the helicopter landing validated me. I didn't need external validation. But because it was the moment when I stopped trying to fit into spaces that were too small for what I had to offer. When I stopped accepting other people's diminished assessments of my worth, when I remembered that I'd spent 22 years being excellent at something difficult, and that excellence doesn't have an expiration date. The beer was cold. The sunset was beautiful. Tomorrow I'd go to the Veterans Career Center and help more people find their paths. Next week I'd fly to San Diego to start planning the new center there. Next month I'd teach another session at Morrison Community Center, and watch kids discover that they're capable of more than they imagined. But tonight, I just sat in the Arizona evening and felt grateful for second chances, for helicopter landings, for the people who see value where others see only age and obsolescence. and for the stubborn, persistent belief that we're never too old to start over, to prove ourselves, to find purpose. Dennis Kowalski taught me something important, though he never meant to. He taught me that the opinion that matters most is your own, that you can either accept other people's limited vision of who you are, or you can prove them wrong by living into your full potential. I chose to prove him wrong, and man, did that feel good. The helicopter landed 2 years ago, but I'm still flying, and I have no intention of coming down anytime soon.